Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Everett, and I am the program manager at the Southern Documentary Fund. And welcome to our second 2022 Production Grant Info Session. The Southern Documentary Fund is a nonprofit that cultivates documentary media made in or about the American South. We believe that media has the power to change lives, and we provide makers with resources to champion Southern storytelling, serving as a leading advocate, providing filmmakers and artists with professional support, filmmaking grants, and fiscal sponsorship. Today, during our session, I'll be going over the documentary core application that we currently use for our production grant. The documentary core application is a collaborative effort by grantors who regularly fund documentary projects to standardize application requirements with the aim of fostering greater access in a more equitable and sustainable documentary field. This grant is also made possible by the generous support of the MacArthur Foundation. Grants are awarded for $10,000 each to 5 projects, and the deadline for this grant is this Monday, July 18th at midnight. So definitely get your grants in by this Monday, July 18th at midnight. But we'll go ahead and get started with this. Let's see here. Let me go ahead and get the application up and we'll get going. Second. Cool. Well, with the documentary core application, you go to our page. We also have some great resources on our page as well. When you go to our website and you go to filmmaking grants, our communications manager put together a good page here. So we have a lot of reference documents. So we have the checklist, we have a sample budget as well if you're struggling with your budget. We also have a recording of a budget workshop as well. To kind of walk you through that process. We also have a sample application and also the previous grant session as well, where you can check back and look at that too. But here are all the eligibility requirements as well on here. You want to go through here, check all this stuff prior to applying. You don't want to waste your time, if you're not eligible. But again, like I was saying earlier, we'll definitely be taking your answering your questions. But again, there's a Q&A box below of your Zoom, and just click that Q&A button and you can just put your questions in there. Don't put them in the chat. Please put your questions in the Q&A box and just click that button and the box will pop up and you put your question in there. So we're gonna just go through this step by step, section by section, stop at each section, open it up for the questions, and then we'll continue to do that till we get to the end of the application. But you want to open your application up. We use Submittable. And also, what we fund, we're a documentary organization. So we strictly fund documentaries. We do not fund narratives. We just are a documentary organization. So nonfiction documentaries, shorts, features, docu-series, and experimental documentaries as well. And also for this grant round, strictly for production. Your project has to be in production. That means you have to be currently filming or have been filming for a while and you're still filming and just looking for those extra funds to finish filming up. You can't be in the research and development stage. You can't be already finished shooting and doing post-production. You can't be, finished with the film and you're doing distribution and engagement and impact. This isn't that type of grant. This is strictly for documentaries, whether you have a short, feature, docu-series, or experimental that are currently in production. All right, eligibility. Project directors should reside or have deep roots in one of the following 12 states, southern states. And deep roots means, you lived here for a while in one of these 12 southern states, you grew up here, born and raised, or you lived in one of these states for a while. People move around, we have several makers that are, they do documentaries down south. They grew up here. They currently live like in LA, Chicago, or New York, but they have roots here. And, so if you have those type of roots, then one of these 12 Southern states, you definitely can qualify for this grant. And those 12 Southern states are Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. And the rest is pretty self-explanatory. You got to have a U.S. Social Security number or U.S. federal tax ID number, must be 18 years of age or older. Applicants must not be enrolled in film school or college, seeking funds for a student project. So those pretty much are those type of requirements. If you have a certain situation where I might can't answer on today's session, feel free to reach out to me. I'll get Dana to put my email in the chat box, but definitely hit me up via email. We can schedule a call soon because I know the grant deadline is coming up, and we can talk about your special circumstance in regards to your eligibility. It's no problem at all. I've been talking to people, for a few weeks now about their eligibility questions. So we'll definitely try to knock that out soon for you to see if you qualify for the grant. Ineligible projects, pretty much projects, applicants that don't meet the above listed eligibility requirements. Non-documentary projects, projects that meet our criteria but have an incomplete application or missing supporting materials. Projects submitted after the deadline, projects that have already received production funds from SDF. So if you have a project, say if you got a grant last year and then you're applying again for the same project, production grant again, you can't get it, so that's pretty much those, ineligibility things. All right, we'll stop right there before we move on to the next session. Let me see. All right, Catherine, how finished should the video film be? Do you need a film crew? Catherine, to answer your question, how finished should the video film be? You may need to email me so we can talk about it, because, if you're in production, your film isn't finished. But when we get to the work sample part, you do need to submit at least a 5-minute sample, 5 to 10 minute work sample of some of the stuff you've already shot. But, the film can't be finished if you're still in production. So email me and we can set up a time to talk about that. Jasmine, see. Hello, we are in production and haven't located an editor and need funding. What does the sample need to entail at this point, especially if you are in early production of the process? Well, the sample, what you want to do is for at least give us about five minutes. And what the sample can do is really just showing us a little bit what the story is about. It can be a nice completed scene. You can just put a scene together, a good 5-minute scene to show, 1 or 2 characters or subjects that your film's about. So if you don't have a professional editor, I understand that. I'm a documentary maker as well. And sometimes, I have to put together clips and samples. But what has worked for me is actually putting together a couple of scenes to really give a glimpse of what the story is about. Right, we're gonna do a couple more questions, then we're gonna move to the next section. I'm jumping the gun a bit, but what if we haven't chosen a name yet? Well, you want to choose a name. You can do untitled, possibly, but you want to have some type of name, and you can always change the name later on. As a filmmaker, I've done it. I've came up with the name, and it can just be tentative. The name doesn't have to be set in stone. Documentary film titles change all the time. I would just choose something to do, and if you change your mind down the road, that's okay as well. You don't have to stick to that title. You can always change it, but definitely come up with some title by the deadline. And if you choose to change it down the road, you can do that as well. Right. Cameron, can our pilot be in Nashville, Tennessee, but the rest of the series be in other cities? Yes, yeah. You can definitely do that, long as majority of those other cities are in those southern states as well. But definitely, with your pilot being in Tennessee for sure. All right, Nia, if I'm submitting for a docuseries, will I need to submit an episode as the sample? No, Nia, you don't have to submit the whole episode. We just need 5 to 10 minutes. That's it, 5 to 10 minutes of it. So it can just be a couple of scenes. As long as you at least give us 5 to 10 minutes, you're good to go with that sample. But you don't have to have the whole episode. If you have the whole episode, that's great too. But 5 to 10 minutes is the requirement. All right, Cameron, is it okay if you're done filming and you are in the editing phase of production, not post-production? Cameron, are you still filming though? Because I've been there where you're filming, plus you're doing editing just to see how the story flows. If you're not filming anymore, technically you're in post-production. So if you're, email me and we can talk about it a little bit more just to see. But if you're still filming, technically you're still in production. But if you're not filming anymore and just doing editing, then you're in post. All right, Sarah, is it okay if one of your scenes is about 5 minutes? Yes, yeah. Like I said, it has to be at least 5 to 10 minutes. So 5 minutes and 20 seconds works. Right? How many projects are chosen? We're only selecting 5 projects for this grant round, 5 projects. And what if the sample is under 5 minutes? Would it still qualify? Get it to 5 minutes as much as you can. That's just going to make your chances better, because that's what the qualifications really ask. So try to get it to 5 minutes. Again, putting a couple of scenes together, you'll have a good 5 minutes. Is this grant for projects that are in development? No. This grant is strictly for production, where this isn't a grant for research or development, it's strictly for production. But if your project is in development, we have a great program, our fiscal sponsor program. So any project out there that may not fit for this grant, but you fit for us as SDF, and your project can still utilize some of our resources, definitely apply for our fiscal sponsorship program. Definitely do that if you're in that development stage or if you're in the post-production stage. So Patrice, we're not funding development right now, but if you're interested, definitely apply to our fiscal sponsorship program and email me if you have any questions about that. Jillian, after this question, I'm going to the next section. Jillian, what if our sample is more than 5 minutes? No, it's 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So if you got something that's 8, 10, you're good. So it's 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So if you have something that's longer than 5, it won't hurt you. Right. Let's go to the next phase here. All right. Project title, again, like the filmmaker that was saying earlier, definitely have a name for this. You can also change it down the road. That happens plenty of times. A lot of documentaries that you watch nowadays, when they first started, they had a different title to it, so no one really knows. So, this is where your title goes. This is where the type of documentary that you're doing, whether you're doing a feature, short, series, or experimental. Also your experience level. If you're a first timer, you select that. If you're emerging, if you're someone who's done 2 to 3 projects, you'll be in that emerging category. If you're experienced, someone who's done 5 or more projects, has distribution and all that stuff, you would click that. And we try to keep it balanced when we award these grants. We just don't give it all to first time. We just don't give it all to emerging. We just don't give it all to experience. We try to give everyone a chance and a shot, so we try to have a good mixture of first timers, emerging, and experienced makers. This is another important one. We need your contact info, because if you get the grant, we need to figure out a way to contact you and get you your money. So you put your name, phone number, email, your mailing address. Also, if you have a secondary contact, this is always good. So if you have a co-producer or co-director, say if you're out shooting somewhere and we need to get up with you, this is a good contact to put right here. Whether you have a co-producer or a producer or a co-director, put their info right here as well, so we can have that as a second backup to contact you. Also, goes back to the criteria, 18 years or older, you have the social security number, or you're a resident in one of these southern states. Also, if you're not a resident currently, but you received approval from me regarding your eligibility, say, going back to what I was saying earlier, you grew up in Mississippi or you grew up in South Carolina or Florida, but now you live in New York or Chicago or Montana, and you're doing your project, this is kind of like what you click here. You also reach out to me as well, just so I can kind of, give you the okay and the thumbs up. All right, log line. This is a very important one. What helps me write my log line is that I constantly look at IMDb, and they usually have log lines to different projects and stuff like that. They're really just a catchy, brief summary of your documentary that really captures those most important elements, central conflict, and the story, in really 1 to 2 sentences. And you really want to have a good, catchy log line. It's not only just helps you with your grant, but also when you finish the film, it helps you just to sell it as well. It's a good marketing line for your project, overall. So some of this stuff not only helps you just in the grant writing process, but it's going to help you and carry with you just down the whole documentary process in general, from production, from marketing, distribution, and everything. These things are always key. The topic summary. This right here is very important as well. This pretty much, you want to explain the relevant cultural, historical, political, or social context for your film right here. You want to detail the topics that's in the film, the issues, what themes are you exploring, what are the challenges in the film, what stakes, are there, or any other questions that your project will cover. This is really where you want to put that here. I know with my martial arts documentary, for the topic summary, we really kind of dive into the whole history of martial arts in the Black community. We talk about that. We talk about the political significance of it, especially during the Black Power movement, where a lot of the Black Panthers and other political, grassroots organizers were training in martial arts as a way for self-defense in the community. So, we added those elements to it to give a background of the topic and also background of the actual subject, Grandmaster Vic Moore as well. Story concept. And also after this section, I'll stop for a couple of questions based off of these 3 sections. Story and concept summary. This is pretty much an important one as well. This is more like the treatment for your documentary. You're going to give us an overview of your story, where you're going to introduce us to your main participant subjects, and also plot points as well, potential story points as well, for your documentary. Describe the anticipated story and narrative trajectory and potential character arcs for your film. So, this is right here is where you're going to give us what the story is about, what your documentary is about, who are the subjects, what are the story arcs, and everything. All right. I'll take a break right there and open up the Q&A section for a little bit before we move forward. All right, Andre, does it matter or not if you have or are working with the 501c3 nonprofit? No, it does not. For this grant, I know with certain grants out there, you have to have like a fiscal sponsor. But with our grant, you do not have to have a fiscal sponsor or a 501c3 attached to your project. So anyone that's a filmmaker can apply to this. Now, if you're looking for a 501c3 to sponsor your project, definitely apply to our fiscal sponsorship program. All right, Jillian, do you know when the revised documentary co-application will be available? That's a good one. This is actually the one that the revised documentary core application is what we're doing right now. Actually going over, and you'll see some of these newer questions when I get to them in a few. But this is kind of like the revised documentary application that we're using. And it's still a work in progress, and like I was saying earlier during the intro, that this core application has done a lot for the documentary community, because in years past, you had all these grants out here, but every grant was different. So it just took a lot of time. With the core app, you have one application that everyone is using. And say if you do ours, you can use this same application, this same proposal for like 10 to 20 other grants as well. So it just makes the whole process easier. Even with these right here, the log line is pretty much the same, but even the word limit is shorter. So you definitely want to look at that too for the topic summary. The word limit is a little bit shorter as well, so you don't have to give us 2-3 pages of each section either. But I'll show you some other add-ons as well in a little while that are optional for this new .core app as well. The artistic approach, another important one. This right here is, you want to describe your creative vision for your project, for your documentary. What type of visuals are we going to see? What type of audio will we hear? What type of music will you be using throughout the project? Are you going to be using animations, reenactments, things like that, motion graphics? Tell us how this film is going to look, how this project is going to look and feel and sound when we see it. So you really want to be very descriptive with the artistic approach, and also give us some examples of the type of style and tone. I know when I got accepted for the Firelight Documentary Fellowship, this is one right here. This part right here really impressed them, where I went into about my martial arts documentary, and I said the stylistic approach, the tone and setting is similar to The Wrestler, starring Mickey Rourke. About this broken champion who's down and out and is rising back again, up again towards the end. And also the soundscape that I was looking for was very similar to David Mamet's Red Belt as well. So I kind of added some of those visual and audio elements, descriptors, to there, so they can kind of look that up and kind of see, visually and sound wise where I was coming from. All right, connection and access. This is also another key one. What is your connection and access to the story? I know this has been a big one for the past few years in the documentary community, about connection and access. What is your connection to the story? And also, what is your access? Are you just showing up filming, or have you taken the time to really connect with this community or the participants, that you're filming? And also, why are you the best filmmaker to tell this story? I've done several projects I've actually turned down because I just felt like I wasn't the best person to tell the story. And I just kind of fell back and say, you know what, I could maybe produce and help with that and help market and help with impact strategy. But I think this person will just be a better director at it because they're from this community. They have a real connection to the story. So you have to really look at that when you're doing documentary projects now. Why are you the best filmmaker to tell this story at this time as well? And then also, what is your connection to the story? And what about your access? Tell us about your access. And not only access to the participants, say if you're doing a documentary that requires a lot of archival material, do you have access to those materials? Because if you don't, it's going to be hard to do the documentary. So it's not only access to the participants in the community, also access to some of those archival materials if your project requires some of those things. I'll take a break for a quick sec to answer a couple of questions in the Q&A box. Let's see what we got here. All right. Feel like there's a lot of overlap between the topic summary and concept summary. What are the biggest differences? Give me some examples. Yeah, so pretty much the topic summary. For example, um, I'll take, all right, one of my films, Wilmington on Fire. It's about the 1898 Wilmington insurrection. And so the topic summary for that would just strictly be about, mostly about the history of the 1898 Wilmington insurrection and, some of the key players in it, et cetera, et cetera. The actual story is different, because the story, isn't just it doesn't play like a book. So the actual story would actually introduce you to some of the characters that we'll be featuring in the film. Like we'll be naming, like you'll name some of the historians, some of the direct descendants of some of the victims of the 1898 insurrection. Also, what are some of their flaws? What are some of their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? So that's where the difference is. The story summary is you're going more in depth of what this film is about. Topic summary is more like you're giving background and context of the film. The story and concept summary is more into what this film is really about, the characters and so forth. All right, Patrick, how many applications do you usually receive? We usually receive about close to 200 applications. I think that was our count last year, was about 200. So we may see that again this year. We may see close to 200, or we may see a little bit under 200. But don't let that deter you. Again, it's very competitive, but don't let that, scare you. Like I said, I've been there, as a first time filmmaker. I'm kind of like in that emerging section. You just got to just do it to the best of your ability, and just do it and roll with it. And as you do these applications, you get better and better with it. Accountability. This is a new one that they added to the updated documentary core app. It's optional on our application. So it's not required for you to answer it, but every organization is different, so you might see, this as not being optional. It might actually be required for another one, but if you want to fill it out, it's cool. And accountability is pretty much, you want to describe your relationship with those participants. It's kind of similar to connection and access, but you're going a step further. Just because you kind of have a connection to the story, what is your relationship with that community and those participants? And also the thing about accountability is, are you open to feedback from that community? Are you open to feedback from the subjects that you're filming? Are you transparent with them, about this whole process of the length it takes? For example, I had to even figure that out, accountability, with my recent project about Grandmaster Vic Moore, because I was doing a bad job of keeping him updated about certain things. But he would call me a lot. He just wanted to know what was going on, when are we going to shoot again, what are some of the dates, when will this be ready, when will that be ready? Because they're a part of this film. We're filming them, but they're still a part of this, and this is their story, and they just want to make sure that the story is in good care. And so I had to even step my accountability game up and be more involved, even though I was already involved with Grandmaster Moore, but I still could have done a better job. And so I decided to start doing that. I started doing weekly calls, called him at least once a week, just to see how he's doing, just see how he's doing, if he needed anything, and also just keeping him updated about the process of this film, saying, hey, we won't be able to shoot this month because we don't have any funding, but I'm working on funding right now, and I'll let you know as soon as I get a few more dollars in, and then we can possibly do some more filming. So those are the type of things you want to do during the filmmaking process, and this is where you put that at. But again, with us, it's optional. Power and positionality. This is another optional one as well. But if you want to answer it, feel free to. Um, and really what this section is, what is your power and your position in relation to the story and those featured in it? You know what I'm saying? So really what this is about, what is your unique lens? Say like I'm an African-American man, and say if I'm doing a story about, and I thought about this too, and this is another, and it goes back to the example of why I felt like I might not be the right person to tell this story. I'm all into doing projects about martial arts now. And so after I finished this project about Grandmaster Vic Moore, thinking about doing a martial arts documentary about a female um, martial artist. So my lens would be completely different coming from that perspective. You see what I'm saying? So say if you're doing that, you want to, kind of describe, what lens, what perspective, what insight or bias do you bring to the story? You know what I'm saying? Talk about your values, your interests, underlying assumptions, worldview, and also your motivations, as well of doing this story also. So it really, like I said, some of these questions sound kind of similar, but they really aren't. Some just want you to dig a little bit deeper and have you think about some things. I know it's definitely made me think about some things, as well as a filmmaker. And again, just like I said, me deciding just to produce this next documentary about a female martial artist, and she's African-American. She's African-American female martial artist. I still felt like I needed an African-American woman to direct this because she's probably going to have a different lens and just bring a different perspective to it. So these questions have also made me evolve as a filmmaker as well. Not saying that I can't do the project, but I'm just saying it just gives you things to think about. After I do this community care and safety, I'll pause and take some Q&A questions. Community care and safety, this is another optional one as well. And this is another interesting one. Pretty much this is about, what are some of those guidelines or some of those values or ethics of your filmmaking practice? You really want to think about just the well-being of these folks that we're doing these films on, because, documentary is very vulnerable. You're pretty much, showing, real life and these folks' lives, throughout. And, after you're done filming, distribution, everything, these folks will be out in the world. And, sometimes it may have some negative impact as well. Like, what do you have a plan in place? And again, you don't have to fill this out because every film is different. You might not even have something that concerns this, that community care and safety. Your project might not even fit this section. But if it does, what are some of the things? I know even with Grandmaster Moore, with my project, I had to think about it a little bit, because I know with him, he's been very controversial over the years. His whole thing is that if you look him up on YouTube, it talks about him beating Bruce Lee. And he keeps saying that they've doctored up the footage and that he actually, did beat Bruce Lee in a speed competition, but they're not showing his punches. Now, I experienced some crazy stuff around that because there are a lot of, Bruce Lee fanatics. Bruce Lee is like the Michael Jordan of martial arts. And the man is dead. And it's like, you really can't say anything or question anything about that. And so I had to make sure he was straight. I was like, man, we can't be doing it like that. So I had to really, make sure that some of the stuff that we're putting out, as a film team and a project, and also him, to make sure that he'll be straight, that he doesn't get tagged online and all this stuff like that. But I'll also share with you a good link, if Dana can share it, where it's a safe and secure handbook that the Doc Society, they created. If you want to, look more into it, it gives some good tips, suggestions for this section right here. And we also have it right here on our reference documents. This right here, Community Care and Safety Handbook. And I can get Dana to share that in the chat as well. But if not, you can just go on here and it's right here. It's a great handbook, strictly focusing on this and some of those community care and safety practices for your project. But I'm gonna pause right there and take a couple of questions, then we'll move forward. Orvi, I am green to this, but in documentaries, do we pay subjects? Who can we pay and not pay? That's a great question. That's a thing that has been talked about over the years. It's really up to you. You can pay subjects if you want. It's not a requirement during the production. It's not a requirement to do that. It's really up to you if you want to do that. How I do it, I don't pay subjects when we're filming them because my budgets are very low as it is, and I don't even pay myself. When I do my films, I don't even pay myself. I pay the crew and everybody else. I get paid after the film is done, and sometimes my films take a couple of years. But I'm not suggesting you guys do that either. But it's really up to you. How I do it is I usually pay my subjects when the film is done, when we do screenings, you know what I'm saying, when we do events. Like for Grandmaster Moore, for example, we've already laid out a foundation of what we want to do when this film is done and how he can make some money from this. Because that was one of my goals as well. I wanted him to be good and to be financially compensated. I know I couldn't do it personally, but I knew the film could be a platform for him to get those type of funds needed for his organization to grow and for just him to sustain himself as well. And so what we're going to do with him is set up booking stuff for him to do speaking engagements. So it's several ways, if you can't pay your subjects initially while you're filming, there are other ways down the road where you can pay your subjects as well. So it's really about what you can really negotiate, man, and what, budget you have. Sometimes you get lucky. I know with my first film, Wilmington on Fire, I was fortunate enough to find young filmmakers that were hungry. They wanted to tell a story. I was new. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was lucky enough to find some makers that said, man, you don't have to pay us nothing. We'll help you make this thing. And I had one of my cinematographers, he said, just pay me $100 a day and feed me lunch. We're good. And he had just got out of high school. He just wanted the experience. And so sometimes you get lucky like that. Most times you don't. And so you want to create a budget. You want to get your money together. You want to apply to grants. And that's why fiscal sponsorship is important. And that's why I'm always going to keep stressing that even during this. Look into our fiscal sponsor program because it takes some type of funding to get these films made. Whether it's a small budget project, mid-level, whatever, you need funding. Fiscal sponsorship can help with that. Sammy, if the plan is to make a short, but you end up with enough to do a feature, will that affect this application or vice versa? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't affect it. It wouldn't affect it at all. As long as you're still in production, it's all good. If you're finished production and you're doing editing and doing post, you can't apply to the fund anyway. But if you're still in production and it's looking like a short, but you never know, and that happened to me actually with the Grandmaster project. Another example. Before I got accepted into the Firelight Media Doc Lab, I was going to do the Grandmaster project as a short documentary because I didn't get funding for it. And luckily I did the same type of application, got into Firelight Media's program, and that really gave me the confidence to say, you know what, I think I can do this as a feature. And then just looking back and just digesting my footage, yeah, I did have enough to actually do a feature as well. And now being a part of that lab and being a part of that organization really opened my eyes to, you know what, let me do this into a feature. So originally the Grandmaster project was a short, and we actually expanded that into a feature. So you can definitely do that. It happens all the time, just like a movie title. You can change it. All right, Orvi. After this question, I'm gonna go to the next sections. Thank you. I had an idea to set up a fund to give scholarships and name the subject I'm doing a documentary for. Yeah, you can do that. People do that all the time. It's not really one way to do this of doing a documentary or how you want to promote your documentary. I've seen people do that. I've seen people set up scholarships, all type of stuff. So yeah, it's whatever you want to do and how creative you can get. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the next section. These are some great questions. Creative control. This is an important one, but sometimes it gets overlooked. Who actually controls the film? Do you have the copyright? Who owns the film? This is really where you want to put that at right here. If you have a production company and you guys own it, you want to put that there. If you solely own it as just you as a person, you want to put that there as well. If you don't own it and you're just the gun for hire, you want to put that here as well. Filmmaker statement. This is a good one right here. This is a very important one. This is really where you're going to explain, who you are as a filmmaker. Who you are as a filmmaker. Also, how's this project expanding, your career, your skills, and how are you evolving your creative practice as well? And I think a good question is, what does success look like for you as a documentary artist also? And I think another one, especially for us makers in the South, what are the creative, professional, or barriers and challenges that you face being a creative and documentary artist in the South? So, you want to put that, all of that right here. Project stage and timeline. This is another important one. And again, we have examples of all this stuff on this page right here. On this checklist, we have it in English and in Spanish as well. Sample application. So if you ever get hung up on any of this stuff, we have examples right here. Like I said, we have a great reference right here. And that's cool because a lot of organizations and grants don't even have that. We really want you guys to be successful with this grant. And not only just with our grant, you can take this application and use it and apply to other grants in the future as well. Because we want you to get our grant, but we also want you to get other grants as well, because we want to see you succeed and we want to see your projects out there in the world. But the project stage and timeline, this pretty much is just an outline of the whole production. You know what I'm saying? So say like you started this whole concept. I'll give you an example right now. I started Wilmington. I'll write it out. I started Wilmington, I would say Grandmaster, since I've been talking about that project. I started that, research and development. I started at about, it was like June of 2017 to about November 2017. So you can kind of go into a little bit more detail, but this is kind of a brief overview. And then I remember we started production. The first thing we actually shot was Grandmaster Vic Moore's karate seminar in Lumberton. So we've been doing pretty much that ever since production of this project. And we got like 3 more scenes left. And, so you kind of want to frame it like this. It's kind of like a timeline of when you were in research and development, where you are right now in production, and also the future as well. When do you expect to finish production? When do you expect to be in post-production? When do you expect to be in distribution? So you want to kind of, follow that out. You know what I'm saying? And also, like I was telling you guys earlier, you want to put some of the activities that you're doing during those times. Just like I was explaining, in December, we were filming Grandmaster Moore's annual karate seminar and Christmas dinner in Lumberton. So you can add those things in there, some of those key moments that you're going to be filming and key things you're going to be doing through production as well. All right, after this one, I'll stop and take a couple of questions, then we'll continue. We're almost done with it. COVID-19, we're all living through this. It's really impacted the documentary world a lot. I know quite a few filmmakers, they're just starting to film again. They haven't filmed anything in a couple of years, and they're just starting to film again. COVID rocked, the whole industry. So I'm glad that they have this on the application. And you want to talk about that? How has it affected you as a documentary filmmaker now? How has it impacted you, and also how has it impacted this project? Explain how you plan on moving the project forward, even with COVID. How are you going to continue to make this project happen? What are some of the safety practices? Do you require your crew and subjects to be vaccinated? Do you require masks? Just talk about, how you've been impacted by COVID, how your project's been impacted, and also how you plan on moving forward in a safe way with your project during COVID. All right, I'm gonna take a couple questions. Let me see here. All right, Andre, do you all look at filmmakers' insurance status or requirements? Is it a plus point or not, like E&O? You should have that in your budget. You should definitely have that in your budget. Insurance, all those things are going to be in your budget. Your E&O insurance, lawyer fees, all of that. All of those things are very important. Some of these things we really don't think about, of having E&O insurance, having an entertainment lawyer. You really want to have all of those things, in place as well. If you want to mention that, you can, but it really should show on your budget as well that you already have that planned out. Markel, if we receive the grant, does that mean you become an investor? If so, would we have to contact you? Markel, no, we're not an investor. This is a grant. A grant is for you and your project. It's for the project. That's what a grant is. We're not an investor. So we don't expect any percentage back from that grant, from your film. We just want you to put our logo, on your promo materials and things like that. And at the end of the film, put our beautiful logo at the end of it. You know what I'm saying? Say that we actually had a part in funding this project. That's really, all we really require for you, but we're not an investor. We're not a production company or a film studio. We're a nonprofit, and this is a grant. So, but if you have, questions about distribution, hit me up. I'm always willing to talk to filmmakers and stuff. I know we're going to have a cool session coming up, not this month, but probably in a couple months, where we're going to talk about the documentary waterfall system. So if you are a person that are looking for investors, of the different ways you should really set up your waterfall structure. We have one of our mentors really focuses on this. She's a part of the Documentary Producers Alliance, and we're actually working on setting up her next session. She's doing a session at the end of this month on budgeting, but her next one in a few months down the road, we'll probably be talking about, what you're talking about, folks that want to invest in documentaries and how that waterfall structure is, about percentages and returns, ROI and all that good stuff. But yeah, we're not an investor. So if you get the grant, it's your grant to make the film, and that's it. An anonymous person: with such a high volume of applicants, it's possible for a grant resource guide, list of funders we can apply to. With so many first-time filmmakers, what the path for guiding these folks beyond this grant, given how significant on this? Oh, that's a good one. I know we have a great page where, and I'll send you this as well after I stop sharing my screen. I'll put it in the chat box, but the IDA, Documentary Association, they have a cool resource page that I even use for myself. Like I said, I'm a filmmaker as well, so I'm in the trenches with you guys. So I go to them a lot, their page. They have a great resource page to show all these grants that are out there, grants that are happening now or coming up. And that's how I kind of go. I go there to look up grants. I know we have a page as well that has a few listings too for grants, whether they're first timers, experienced folks or emerging. There are all type of grants out there. And also another key thing, a lot of times people forget, your local communities as well. Locally, like a lot of your arts councils in your certain county or city have grants available a lot of times. I know I was on a board, a panel for a local art council, and they only had 2 people apply for this grant. Only 2 people applied, so they ended up giving both of these folks the grant. And a lot of people just didn't know that they actually had a grant for filmmakers in that city. So you'll be surprised what's out there. It's just, looking out there and just calling and asking, those questions. But as soon as I finish this, this little walkthrough, I'll put that IDA link in there where it has like a cool little database of a whole bunch of grants out there. And they have different ones. They have people that are Pacific Islander, African American, all of that. You know what I'm saying? New filmmakers, everything. Let me see here. All right, that's it for the Q&A for right now. Let's go to accessibility. Accessibility, this is another new one for this grant for the updated .core app. And accessibility is pretty much how are you going to make your film accessible for someone who's deaf, someone who's blind or with low vision, someone who's disabled as well. How are you going to make this this film accessible to those type of folks? So you want to think about that. You want to think about doing captions for your film, audio descriptions, transcripts as well. These are some of the things we don't think about as filmmakers, but we need to start thinking about them. You want to put these in your budgets as well. You want to put cost in there to see how much captions will cost, how much audio descriptions will cost. Rev.com is a great company that I use for all this stuff. They have good rates. They have great turnaround time too, and user-friendly as well. But Rev.com is a great company to get your captions and all that cool stuff for. And then also you can talk about some of the actual venues where you're going to plan on showing your film. What type of venues have some of these type of things in place to for accessibility. I know I've checked out a few venues. I won't even touch them if they're not accessible. I was looking at a venue to try to do a work in progress screening with me and Grandmaster Moore, because Grandmaster Moore's in a wheelchair. And I can't do the screening at this one spot that I was looking into because they don't have access for people in wheelchairs. So I said, no, I can't do this. So you want to look at all of those things when you're looking into some of these venues when you're done filming, and you want to talk about all of that. Not only for the film, but also the viewing experience as well. Not only for your subjects, but also the audience goers as well. How are you going to make it accessible for folks?
Hey, Chris, can you explain what rev.com is?
Oh, okay, my fault. And did you put a link in the chat? If you can.
I will.
But cool. Yeah, rev.com, they're pretty much a transcription type of service. And they work with everyone, all, filmmakers, studios, everything. I was introduced to them years ago, and everyone pretty much uses them, but they do captions, transcriptions, all of that. So whenever I do a documentary, and similar to you guys, you have all these hours of interview footage and everything like that. You send that to Rev, and they can transcribe all of that. I know when I first did my first documentary, I had to do all the transcriptions myself because I didn't know anything about Rev, back then. So I had to do everything myself, and I had no budget either. But as I grew and found out about rev.com and places like that, I was able to, send them some of this stuff and get those captions and get those transcriptions. So they do all that. And say if you wanted to have your film in a different language, to do those type of transcriptions, and say like you wanted to do something in Brazil, for example, and you wanted to get the transcriptions and those captions in Portuguese, you can do that with them. So they have different price points, and they're great people. They have a great customer service line, a chat box line. So if you have any questions about those type of things, definitely hit them up. Audience consideration. After this, I'm gonna stop again and take a couple questions. Then, we're almost there to the finish line. Audience. What does your audience look like for this film? Every film is different, but for your specific film that you're applying for this grant for, describe that audience, and also how are you going to reach them and why? So those are really what you want to put here. Who's your audience? Why are they your audience, and how do you actually plan on reaching them? So that's what you really want to put here. And the audience thing is very big, because if you don't know who your audience is, you shouldn't make the film. Really, you want to know who your audience is before you film anything, because that really is the starting base. Because if you don't have an audience, if you don't have folks to watch your project, watch your film, and engage with it, it's just out there. So this has always been a number one for me, is audience and distribution and marketing. So really, focus on this as well. This is very important. Similar to the topic summary and concept, the audience is very important. Intended impact. What type of impact do you want this film to have? Not only to the community that it might be in, or the participants, but just society as a whole. Is your film social? Does it have some cultural type impact? Does it have some type of political impact? Whatever impact it is. What are your impact goals? What do you want to accomplish with this film? I know even with the Grand Master Project, even though it's about martial arts, our impact, what we want to do is to show the importance of martial arts in the African American community. Just showing how we really embrace this culture and this art form, from back in the 60s to, I would say, on up, and really embracing martial arts and the disciplines behind it, and what it really did for our community back then, and how we should really get back into it. And not only just for the discipline aspect, the health aspect that it brings, everything, focus and all of that. So our impact thing is to really hone in on a lot of martial arts schools in the cities and urban communities, and do these free, impactful engagement screenings, mixed in with conversations with other martial artists in those certain communities, talk about what they're trying to do in their community to make their community better through the power of martial arts as well. So those are some of the things you want to think about with impact. It's not that hard. It's really, impact is really what you want your film to accomplish. That's really what impact is. If your film, you want to impact, voter registration, you want voter registration to increase in your certain state or town, that could be the impact if your film is about that. And that's what you want this film to do. Even with Wilmington on Fire, I had several impact campaigns for that, because the whole premise of Wilmington on Fire was around voting and stopping African Americans' right to vote back in the 1890s. And so we partnered with several voting organizations and political organizations to do screenings mixed with voter registration drives and everything. So you can get very creative with your impact campaign and strategy. I love, this is another section that I love too, because you can get creative with it. Let me take a couple more questions before I go on to distribution and the rest of it. Let's see here. Let me see. No, we're good. All these questions have been asked. Distribution and marketing. This is another important one. You want to describe the intended distribution of your film. What are your plans? And you want to list what is your festival strategy? What festivals do you want to target? Do you have any theatrical goals and aspirations? Also community screenings as well. Do you plan on doing community engagement screenings? Also, have you looked into broadcasting? You have PBS out there, you have Real South. I have a broadcasting deal right now with Free Speech TV. You have several broadcasters out there that are looking for great documentary content. So you want to put all that in there. Even if you don't have a distribution deal in place, me, for example, I do all DIY distribution, but I have a concrete plan of when I do my proposals, showing what all we do. Here are the festivals, the certain festivals we target because they fit the certain demographic of what our audience is. Everyone can't go to Sundance. Everyone can't get into Tribeca, but that's okay. Maybe you can say, if you're an African-American filmmaker who has a subject about the African-American experience, Pan-African Film Festival might be best for you to premiere. The American Black Film Festival might be best for you to premiere, so, or say if you're not African-American and say like you're doing a story in Wilmington, kind of like I did, and the Cucalores Film Festival is a big film festival here, it might be best for you to premiere in Wilmington. Your story might be kind of around Wilmington or something like that. And that's what I did with Wilmington on Fire. I actually premiered Wilmington on Fire at the Cucalores Festival. And we actually still have the biggest attendance record to this day at that festival. That festival's been around about 27 years, and we still have the record to this day. So, I didn't care about going to Sundance with it. I went right to that community where that project was about. And that actually just helped everything after that. So it felt like a Sundance experience just being at Cucalores and premiering at Cucalores. And those folks still ride with me to this day and still support to this day. And so we were able to build a nice fan base and audience just premiering locally at a local regional festival. So you don't always have to go for the big guns. You can kind of pick your matches and pick your spots to really fit what your project is and what you're trying to accomplish. But this is where you want to kind of put all that, in here. Key personnel. This is really another important one as well, especially for first timers, people that don't have a lot of experience. When you're building your team, even when I did my first film, Wilmington on Fire, I had no experience. And I didn't know a lot about doing a film, but I made sure I had people in place that knew what they were doing, and also they could help me down the road. So you want to put your key personnel here. So if you're the director, you put yourself here, brief bio. You want to kind of limit it to a paragraph for each person, but you want to put your key people, the director, the producer. If you have a script writer, who's doing the music, who's the composer, who's the editor. Do you have like some key advisors that may be some, a name in the industry. I've done that recently with my follow-up film, Wilmington on Fire Chapter 2. We got a couple of big names in the industry that have attached themselves to produce. One is, I don't want to brag or nothing, but one we put on our application recently for a grant. We have Peyton Reed. He does the Ant-Man movies for Marvel. He came on board to be an EP on our project. So we're able to put him down on there as well. And so, it really means a lot when you can get, some of those type of folks, whether it's an advisory role or an EP role or producer role, but make sure you have all that in writing and you have a contract first. Because sometimes people just throw names out there because they might have had a conversation, with them on a Zoom chat. But you really want to make sure you have all that legally straight first before you add that on there. So make sure, all your paperwork and stuff is in order and they're cool with you sharing that they're attached to your project. A lot of times people will get involved with your project if they really believe in the cause, believe in you, and they're willing to put their name out there for you to help with getting grants and to help with fundraising. So, you want to put your key personnel right in here. I'm going to go a little bit quick so we can answer the rest of these, and then we'll get to the rest of the questions. Fundraising strategy. What's your overall strategy for raising money for your film? This right here, you want to really break it down. Like I said, we have some examples over in here as well in this sample application, but you really want to show what all have you applied to. We just don't want to see that you apply to us. We want to see that you apply to us. You have Catapult out there. You have so many grants out there. We want to see what all grants are you applying to, all of that. So you want to kind of put your strategy, you want to fundraise doing grants. You got a crowdfunding campaign for such and such amount of dollars. We've been doing fundraising parties. We have a fiscal sponsor that we're aggressively seeking funding. So this is where you want to put that at. your overall strategy to meeting that budget that you sent to us. Funding to date, this is where you kind of break down the funding and those sources as well. So like, say like you're applying to us, you would put Southern Documentary Fund, 10,000. I think it's in process, you know what I'm saying? Not in process, but applied to. So you can put Southern Documentary Fund, 10,000 applied to, you know what I'm saying? And so if you already received some grant funding from another entity, you will put that down. Like say if you got a grant from ITBS, you will put ITBS down, the amount that you received from them. And if you got it, you'll put secured, and if you didn't get it, you just put applied to. But it's not just for grants. People do crowdfunding as well. If you did a crowdfunding campaign and you raised 50,000, put that on here. If you invested and put in your own money, put that down here as well. We just want to see overall, whatever way you're able to fund your project, you want to put all that funding right here, everything that's up to date. And this section right here is where you put your budget. You just upload it. These are the acceptable file types: CSV, DOC, DOCX, PDF, XLS, XLSX. So these are really the file types. And then you can also check out our sample budget over here. And if you're still kind of struggling with your budget, we have a great workshop recording that you can check out to really show you how to put that together. Grant impact. This right here is very important as well. If you got this grant from us, if you got the 10 grant from us, how are these funds, how are you going to spend them? How will these funds help you move forward with the project? And this is where you want to put that. It could just be a short paragraph, a couple of sentences to really explain that. Visual samples. If you're emerging, if you have experience, you can put your prior work here. But if you're a first timer and you don't have any prior work, you can send some type of visual sample. Send us a link of like a lookbook or a pitch deck, you know what I'm saying, of some of, some previous stuff that, and things like that, so you can send us some type of visual of what you want this film to kind of look like, you know what I'm saying? And you can also leave it blank as well, because it's not required if you are a first timer. But if you are emerging, or if you have some experience, definitely put a link with the password to some of your projects, like one or two, or your best one. The current sample rough cut. The current sample, like I said earlier during the talk, 5 to 10 minutes is all we need. 5 to 10 minutes is required. So a work sample, really, it's just showing, that you have access to characters. It's kind of showing the visual style and the tone of the project, so you can do that really in a couple of scenes. And I know with my work sample that I did for Grandmaster, how I set it up, right? I started off is showing this countryside where Grandmaster Moore lives. He lives in the small town of Delco, North Carolina. So I kind of captured that feeling of this small, country town. And then you start hearing a phone, ring. And then they show this, kind of like dilapidated trailer, looks like no one really lives in there, but he actually lives there. And then you go inside, we show shots of his martial arts memorabilia, and you still hear the phone ring, and then he's on the phone while you seeing like his old trophies and karate patches and a sword in the corner, a ninja sai on the chair, and then you see Grandmaster Moore's face, talking to one of his students. So, just like how I did that, it kind of shows the visual style, the tone, the look of it, and introduces us to our main character, which is Grandmaster Moore. So it's very simple. It's very simple. It doesn't have to be polished. You don't have to have the full color grade. You don't have to have the full sound mix. None of that. Just something that we can see to see, where you are with production, to see if you really have a story in. And then, just put that in. Also, if you have like a longer cut that's over 10 minutes and you just want to show a certain portion, let us know. And here's an example of that. Just say, hey, Chris, I got a 30-minute cut and I just want to show from the 5 minute, from the 2 minute mark up into the 9-minute mark, and that's it. And just so label that, and we'll watch just that from that label. Have you received support from SDF in the past? This is one we definitely would like for you guys to answer, whether you've been fiscally sponsored by us, have you gotten one of our grants before in the past, or if you haven't received any funding or sponsorship from us. We need this stuff for our own internal tracking and reporting. So definitely, please answer this. How did you learn about SDF grants? Did you see it on social media? Was it word of mouth? Are you a part of our email list? Let us know how you found out about our grant and organization in general as well. And also, what organizations in your community do you recognize as serving independent artists, especially documentary artists? What organizations in your city, state, town, county really supports documentaries and documentary artists? This is another optional one, just demographics, race, ethnicity. None of this stuff counts against you. It's just for our own demographic purposes, just for reporting. So none of this stuff is going to disqualify you. So you can be honest and truthful when answering some of this stuff. But again, it's optional as well. Also, gender as well is here. Also, are you a person with a disability as well? And so you go through that. And also, while you're doing this, please remember to save your draft just in case. You never know, your power might go out, like it's raining here, and the power might go out or something might happen with your computer. After each section, a lot of times I always scroll down and hit this button just to make sure my stuff is saved. And so you don't have to go all the way back and just do the whole process over. And then you hit submit, and it's good luck, from there. Let me go ahead and answer a couple more questions I think we have in the chat before we close it out. And again, if you have any questions, this is the time now to put it in the Q&A before we close out. Let me see here. Okay, should our budget be limited to production or also include post-production budget needs, even if those are things that this grant will cover? Yes, you want to put your overall budget on there. You just don't want to put production budget. You want to put your overall budget, because again, this grant application just isn't for us. You're going to be using this grant application for other organizations as well. And a lot of other organizations, they're tough. I've applied to all the major ones. They are hardcore with it. We're very lenient. You know what I'm saying? Because I've applied to some places, man. You got to have everything on point. So it's good to get into that of doing it that type of way. But yeah, you want to have a full budget on it. You know what I'm saying? I know with research and development, you can get away with just having the research and development budget portion because you're still in the research and development phase. You don't even know what your overall budget is going to be. But when you're in production, you know what you spend, and you should know what your post-production budget is going to be too. So you definitely want to have all of that in your budget. Is it a disadvantage for the filmmaker if they only applied for the Southern Documentary Grant? Yes, because again, it goes back. You just don't want to rely on our grant because I know it's going to cost you more than $10,000 to make your project. You want to have a plethora of things. You want to apply to as many grants as possible. And it doesn't have to be these big grants. Like I told you earlier, you have a lot of local grants that give out grants for $1,500, $2,500, bucks that add up. And it makes you look good whether you have a big grant or you have some small ones. Also crowdfunding as well. So you want to show not only are you applying to grants, but you're also doing other initiatives. You're doing fundraising events, you're doing crowdfunding, and things like that. So you want to show a good balance of not just applying to our grant, but you're applying to other grants, you're applying to other fellowships, you're doing crowdfunding. You want to show all of that. That's going to really make your proposal competitive and stand out. Cameron, let me show. All right, Cameron. I'm trying to create a pilot that I want to eventually become a series. Should I apply with just the pilot in mind and just mention a long-term goal? Should I apply with the whole series in mind? Um, I would apply with the whole series because it's going to be a docu-series. Um, Again, have you shot the pilot yet? If you haven't shot it yet, it means you're still in development. So if you shot the pilot yet, and that means you have to shoot the rest of the series, you are in production. But there might be a bigger answer for you. Email me, and we can chat more about it. Because I know we're running out of time today, but email me and we can chat more about it, tomorrow or Thursday. Let me see. Is this open to more than one type documentary? Example, documentary in which the producer protects the name as innocent because they are still fresh employed, subject to educational. Okay. Can a 2 to 5 minute short qualify? Yeah, it's a short. A documentary short is like anything under 40 minutes. You have several Oscar documentaries that have been like 5 minutes. So yeah, if it's a great film, it's high quality, and it meets what we're talking about. Yeah, documentary can be 2 to 5 minutes. It qualifies as a short. A short documentary is really under 40 minutes. So it's nothing that's too short for a documentary short. We have been recording our Zoom calls in preparation for our documentary, but the bulk of our filming will take place in person late August. Are we still eligible to apply? Email me so we can talk a little bit more about it, because it's a couple of questions I would need to ask you. Email me. My email is in the chat next to you on the Zoom. Email me, and so we can set up a time in the next day or so to talk a little bit more about it, because there's a couple of things I would need to ask you. If we're a small time, first time filmmaker, what are important things you look for in our budget? Well, regardless, whether you're a first time filmmaker or experience, people look for in your budget is, can you actually make this film with this budget? If you send us a budget that's $10 million and your first time, and that might not happen, So whatever story you're trying to tell, make sure it's a story you can tell within a good budget. The typical budget for a documentary, if everyone can get paid, including yourself, and everything is, because you got to look at everything. When you're doing a budget, it accounts for everything. It accounts for your pay, the crew's pay, travel if you need to, post-production, if you're using archival material, licensing. And when you're doing the budget, you got to use the industry standard. Because I know the industry standard for using archival photos is typically runs you about $100 a photo. So say if you have to calculate all those things. You also have to calculate legal fees. You want to set, with your budget, you want to set about 5,000 to 10,000 just in legal counsel overall. You want to set it a good minimum of 5,000. I will always set that. And then you got E&O insurance that can run you 5,000 to 10,000 as well. And when you look at it overall, your budget might be 250 to 500,000. That's the typical budget for a documentary. So that looks, good for whether you're a first timer or not. Doesn't mean that you're going to actually make that film for 500,000. You budgeted for that and you made it for what you can make it for. But it is what it is. So as long as that budget really looks reasonable and that you can actually make it, that's what we look for. We don't look for things, like I said, if you got a budget that's $10, $20 million, nah, that's probably not going to happen. You know what I'm saying? Because $10,000 is not going to really create a dent, for your project, especially production. But especially if you're a first time. Now, if you're experienced, it might be a little different. But if you're a first timer, I would say stay within that 500,000 and below range. Cool. Let me see, Andre. Let me see. Oh no, all these questions are answered. Cool. We'll wrap up. Again, if you have any other questions, definitely email me. Dana, she put the email, my email in the chat box. Are there certain budgeting software? I don't really use a software. I usually just use a spreadsheet. But if you go on our resource page, we actually have a sample budget that I think you can actually copy. That I kind of use. I use like a spreadsheet is really the best way you want to kind of set it. I don't have a budgeting software. If anyone else is out there that uses a budgeting software, put it in the chat box. I'll let her know what that is too. But that's why I like doing these things, because you meet so many people that can share information as well. But definitely email me and I can see if I can find some information on that too, and I can send it to you. But again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our second info session for our 2022 SDF Production Grant. Also, if you're in the Columbia, South Carolina area, we have our next Fresh Docs event tomorrow at the Nickelodeon Theater, 5:30 p.m. We'll be doing a Fresh Docs work in progress screening of In the Bubble with Jamie with filmmaker Emily Harold. The work in progress screenings are very near and dear to us because it's a way for us to be in the community and allow our filmmakers to get that needed feedback they need for their work in progress screening, and they can take that info and that feedback from the community and tool some things in the edit before they put that final edit out there and start getting into festivals and distribution, etc. So if you're in the Columbia area, definitely come down, check us out. Dana just put the link in the chat box. It's free, free registration, open to the public, 5:30 tomorrow at Nickelodeon. Come see me, I'll be there as well. If you want to chop it up more about the grant, I'll be there too. So, and then also we have a cool mentorship roundtable on budgeting. Even though the grant will be passed by then, always good to update your skills about budgets. We have Rebecca Ferguson this month, July 28th. She'll be doing a mentorship roundtable about creating your budget. So whether you have a docuseries, a short doc, feature doc, she will be there to give a whole overview of how to put a budget together for these specific type of projects, for these specific type of documentary projects. And she'll be there to also answer your questions as well. And again, that program is also free, and Dana put the link in for that as well. So we have two great programs coming up for this month that hopefully you guys can take full advantage of and do that as well. And also the deadline as well is coming up this Monday, midnight. So get those applications in, get your questions in as well to me through email, and we can just set up a time to talk on the phone, go over those questions, and good luck to everybody. I know this is a daunting task. I'm there with you. I'm applying the grants myself, but just stay confident, stay focused, and just take your time with it and submit and just let things be. But again, thank you all today for attending our second SDF 2022 Production Grant Info Session. And my name is Christopher Everett, the Program Manager at SDF. You guys have a good day. Peace.